After my experiences in a haunted theater, I began to further explore the paranormal history surrounding the town my college was in. I won't share the name of the town or the college, but I will tell you that it was in Ohio. I keep the town's name a secret to protect the citizens and the people reading this. Trust me when I say you want no part in the restaurant that houses these demonic forces. I made a friend at school whose family turned out to own the restaurant in question, and while I had found very little on its history online, the family shared with me a dark tale that led to the third floor being closed off to the public. The tale essentially goes that there was a fire there in 1999, with absolutely no explanation. The fire was extinguished before anything other than the third floor was destroyed, but the fire had threatened to engulf the whole building. Upon rebuilding the third floor and attempting to move dining tables and such in there began to be a host of dark encounters. All of the workers reported a heavy feeling, and tables and chairs seemed to move of their own accord overnight. The activity reached its climax when a member of the family was pushed down the stairs from the third floor, back down to the second. Following this, the family closed the third floor and sealed it off. After the owner heard I was an aspiring paranormal investigator, he gave me the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to investigate. I called all my friends and assembled a team of 5 individuals to go into the third floor. We showed up at about midnight, ready to go, and made our way up to the third floor. My friend had brought a Ouija board with him, something all of us regret to this day. I had brought all of my ghost hunting equipment, including digital recorders, EM pumps, and a spirit box. The very moment I walked into the third floor, I felt a chill in my bones the likes of which I had never felt before and haven't felt since. I immediately began to conduct burst EVP sessions, attempting to capture evidence on the entity up there. After 2.5 hours, we had nothing, but I kept my hopes up based on the fact that we were coming up on the witching hour, and I've had the most success with paranormal investigations at that time. 3 a.m. rolls around, and I begin to try and stir up the spirits through provocation. My friend busts out the Ouija board. I have to take this time to warn against both of these tactics. Provocation leads to angry spirits, something you don't want, and using a Ouija board is like holding up a vacancy sign over your head and just inviting spirits, both good and bad, in. I hadn't been provoking these spirits for more than a few minutes when one of the chairs on the far side of the room slid out on its own, and I could see pressure on the seat, like someone had sat down. I immediately walked over to the table and took a seat across from the chair that had been pulled out. I pulled out the digital recorder and began to ask it questions about who it was and how it had gotten there. At this point, my memory gets a bit hazy, and I only have most of my friends' stories to go off of. The last thing I remember is an intense feeling of vertigo and seeing a dark shadow in the chair across from me. After this, according to my friends, I became very limp and began speaking very slowly to the presence across the table from me. Upon reviewing the digital recording of the conversation following this moment, I can hear myself ask in a voice that I can only describe as clearly not my own, "Where did you come from?" And then the growled response, which sounds eerily like, "Hell." After that, the digital recorder dies despite having brand new batteries in it. My friends tell me that I grabbed my arm at this point and got up, sprinting down the steps to the first floor and out the door. My memory becomes very clear upon getting out into the still busy street. I remember a sharp pain in my left forearm and an intense feeling of panic. I looked down at my arm to see what looked like 3 distinct claw marks. 3 usually being demonic in nature, the mocking of the Holy Trinity. At this point, I called off the investigation, and I've never returned to that restaurant again. I moved across the country a few years later, and I have absolutely no intention of returning. I know how easy it is to doubt the existence of demons and the validity of this story, but I assure you, if you had been present, you wouldn't be so skeptical. My friends and I took an extended break from hunting due to the events of that night. It was hard to explain over text, and is much better orated, but the fact remains that demons exist in this world, and I cannot stress it enough to hunters to practice extreme safety when dealing with dark entities. You never know what kind of force you're dealing with.
I was at my grandparents' house one night. My grandmother then came into my room at 3:30 in the morning and told me, "Your grandfather needs your help. Get up." This sort of startled me because she's never done anything like this. I go out to where my grandfather is right outside the door that goes into the garage, and he tells me that the garage door just went up and down 6 or 7 times, and we need to check it out. I obviously said alright, and we went into the garage, only to find the pull string that prevents the door from opening, which can only be pulled from the inside, was pulled. He looked at me and he said, "We have to go outside to fix it so no one can get in." We then headed outside, and when we rounded the corner to look at the garage, the motion lights came on and there seemed to be scratches on the door. He and I fixed the door and went back to bed. About 2 weeks after this, I was staying there again, woke up around 2:30 in the morning to hear stomping in the kitchen, which is very close to my room. I get up and hear the stomps coming closer to my door and stop. I figured that my grandfather was adjusting the thermostat. I opened my door to see what was going on, only to find that everyone in the house was asleep and all the lights were turned off. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night. A few weeks passed and I went over there on a weekend because I had nothing better to do. Since it was a weekend, I'd stay up rather late and watch TV on my bed with my door open. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and for whatever reason, I woke up. I looked around and realized that I'd fallen asleep with the TV on. I looked at my door, and at that instant, I saw a man-sized figure step out of my doorway and walk down the hall towards the kitchen. I slammed the door and stayed up all night. By this time, I was pretty convinced I had a demon or a ghost in my grandparents' house. I was just relieved that whatever was in the house wasn't following me. Maybe a month after the last incident happened, I was at my dad's house and I was about to go to sleep. At my dad's, I'm on the other side of the house from everyone. It was maybe 10:30 at night, and I was about to go to sleep. I had laid down, turned my TV off, and was drifting to sleep. Then outside of my door, I heard a combination of a stomping and a really loud sound. This honestly scared the hell out of me. I, in all my infinite wisdom, decided to see what it was. When I opened the door, I saw the same thing that I saw in my grandparents' house. I teared up from fear and left the light on and fitfully tried to sleep. It didn't work well. Maybe a month and a half had passed after the last incident. I was at a friend's house and he and I cleared out his shed so we could just hang out in there and smoke his hookah. He usually has a lot of people over to his house, but this night it was just he and I. We were smoking and we were almost finished. I was just sitting there listening to the music when all of a sudden a black flash darted underneath my legs. I didn't feel anything. I started to look around to see if one of the cats came with us. As I started to look around, I realized that there was no cat in the shed. I started to become afraid on the inside, but trying to keep myself outwardly calm, I looked up at my friend, who had the look of being close to panic, and said to me, I think something just ran underneath your legs." At this point, I started freaking out because I didn't say anything about it. We both ran out of the shed and went into this house and just watched TV until we calmed down and went to sleep. This was the last time that anything like this has happened.
In 2010, I was a 25-year-old single male that enjoyed talking with women over a dating site. I didn't have much luck until I started talking to a lady named Jennifer. She was my type and we really hit it off. We would chat on the website every night for about 2 weeks, until I finally got the nerve to ask for her phone number. She agreed to exchange numbers, and we talked for another week or two, until she decided she wanted to meet. We arranged a time and place to meet, and discussed what to do on a first date. She told me that she'd rent a movie and order a pizza, so we could just hang out at her house. Since she lived in the country, and her house would be difficult to find, we met up at a gas station. She said I could follow her to her place. When we finally arrived, I noticed she lived alone in the house. I asked her if she had roommates, and she told me that she was a teacher and had just recently bought the home. I didn't think much of it. That part sounded pretty legit to me. Once inside, we sat down, started the movie, and chowed down on some pizza. Later on, we decided to cuddle on the couch, and then we started making out. It went from the couch to her bed, and as we were laying on her bed facing each other, looking into one another's eyes, I saw something standing in the doorway of her bedroom, out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head to look, and when I had seen what was standing there, I was paralyzed with fear. It was the blackest, darkest shadow I'd ever seen. It looked like someone was wearing a cloak with a hood up over its head, like the stereotypical Grim Reaper. It took 2 slow steps, walking across the doorway until it disappeared behind the wall. I jumped up as she did when she had seen me jump. I whispered in a panicked voice, "There's someone in the house." At this point in my life, I was a police officer. I knew what I had seen, but my logic told me it was an intruder. Like a dumbass, I had left my firearm in my car. I guess I didn't want to make her uneasy, having a gun on my hip. So I looked around her bedroom for anything I could use as a weapon. She had a huge candle in a glass jar on her nightstand. I picked it up and thought to myself, I'll smash this over their head and surprise them. Together, she and I searched her house from top to bottom, but we couldn't find anyone. Once we finished searching the house, a feeling of dread and terror hit me like a ton of bricks, because at that moment, I realized what I had seen. I described it to her, and she started crying and accusing me of not liking her and making up shit so I could leave. I was incredulous. It was like that little voice in my head telling me, "Get out now, it's time to leave." I told her to pack a bag and stay with a friend, or to come with me, but I wasn't staying another second in her house. I grabbed all my stuff, rushed out the door, jumped in my car, and got the fuck out of there. I don't think I've ever pulled out of a driveway so fast in my life. I was speeding and didn't slow down until I was 3 blocks away from my house. About a month later, I received a message from Jennifer on Facebook. She told me that she believed my story now, and said that since that night, weird things had begun to happen in her house. I asked her what had happened, and she told me that at night, she could hear pots and pans rattling in her kitchen. Doors would open on their own, and the television would turn off by itself.
In the late 1980s, as a curious teen, I became fascinated with the occult. As a child growing up in a religious household, my first exposure of occult themes came from the Bible. I always strained to understand my beliefs concerning the teachings of the church, and especially struggling with my own faith in God. After learning that demons were former angels who had rebelled against God, were cast down to earth, and could interact with humans, I came to the conclusion that the best way to prove to myself that God existed was to see if demons existed. There was no internet back then to explore my questions and sate my curiosity. Knowledge of the occult was hard to come by and had to be searched in from libraries and bookstores. In time, I collected a small library of books about witchcraft and demonology. Looking back now, I realize how foolish I was. I didn't understand what I was getting myself into. Those books have long since been destroyed after what happened to me. I began reading these books and actively trying to invite demons into my life. I read out loud long strings of demonic names out of the books. I would cast spells and draw symbols on my walls and on the floor. Nothing happened. I had a few strange dreams, but that wasn't proof of anything. Then, one day, I came across a paragraph that told me to get a full clove of garlic and stake it with a large iron nail to attract demonic power to a place. I did this and put the staked clove deep in my closet. The demons didn't come to me suddenly with a large fanfare. They came gradually, insidiously working their way into my life and psyche without my hardly noticing, until they were ready. Then they pounced, and I was almost destroyed. I woke up more frequently with nightmares. I woke up sometimes listening intently because I could have sworn that what had woken me up was laughter or whispering. I pass these off as dreams. Sometimes I wake up paralyzed for a few seconds. I pass this off as a sleep paralysis. I woke up sometimes with all my sheets on the floor, far from my bed. I awoke some nights thinking, was my bed just moving? I pass this off as restless sleep. The one night I woke up to watch my hand and arm shoot out from my side, grab the lamp on my light table, and throw it across the room with such force that I pulled my shoulder out, and the lamp practically exploded against the opposite wall. I sat in the dark, cradling my arm, wondering how I could do such a thing out of a dead sleep. A few nights later, I did the same thing with a new lamp, with the same arm. I had to wear a sling to restrict movement of the shoulder. A few nights later, it happened one more time, but I didn't grab the lamp. I tore the sling right off my neck. I thought that these things were very strange, but I proceeded to invite the demons. I was still not convinced. I was a fool. I became irritable, and my family started to notice. I became lazy with my schoolwork, distant and withdrawn, and argumentative. My parents thought I might be on drugs. I was brought to a psychologist who tested me for them and diagnosed me with depression. I told no one what I was up to. Over time, the odd occurrences increased, but due to the time and space and some embarrassment, I will leave some out. I will tell you that late one night, I awoke to the full moon shining on my face through a window. I debated telling you this part because it sounds so strange, but I began growling at the moon. I remember not thinking as myself. My thoughts were basic and primal. I began growling more ferociously until I was practically foaming at the mouth and snapping at the moon like a rabid animal. I eventually snapped out of this and wondering what the hell I was doing. I didn't know yet, but at this point the demons were ready to pounce. They felt that they had weakened me enough and wore down the walls between worlds within my room, enough to extract my soul from my body. These next recollections are the most vivid in my mind. One night, I awoke and I felt very strange. I felt a jarring disjointedness. Then part of myself lifted out of my feet and then worked up my body until I was floating above my bed. I felt something, like if you were to smoothly pull a piece of tape off a flat surface. I was floating above my bed and I was looking down on myself. I tried to move, but I knew somehow that I would have to learn how. After being amazed at what was happening, I then felt something grab my feet and started to violently shake me like a rag doll. I felt like a streamer being whipped back and forth. I saw one side of the room, then the other flash before my eyes. Something was trying to tear me away from a connection I still had to my body lying on the bed. I was terrified, and I knew that if whatever was doing this to me succeeded, that I would die. But the cord, I didn't know what it was, tying me to my body, was too strong. They could not break it. They gave up and let go, and I floated lazily up to the ceiling. I remember distinctly my cheek resting lightly against the ceiling of my room. I set my eyes on a specific imperfection in the ceiling I had studied many times from below, but it was now inches from my face. I remember thinking how it looked different from there. Suddenly, I was in my bed, looking up at the ceiling where I just was. I was taking deep breaths like I needed air. I suddenly felt strange and was paralyzed with fear. I felt my chest getting heavy. I took a deep breath, but the feeling stayed. Now I felt as if I was being pushed down, but did not feel any pressure in a specific place. It was as if my invisible weight had been draped over my torso and was getting heavier. I remember thinking that this is just a dream. There's no way any of this was actually happening. Then I heard a sound I would never forget as long as I live. I heard the sound of the bed creaking. I was sinking into the bed, and the sound of the bed warping under the increasing weight was real. This was really happening. In a frenzy of fear, I burst out of the bed and ran out of the room in the house. I went to my sister's house, who lived next door, and woke her up to let me in. I was wide-eyed and hyperventilating. She eventually calmed me down and began asking me questions. I did not tell her about what I had been doing, and I told her I saw a ghost. She laughed it off and told me to stay the night if I wanted to. I stayed, but I did not sleep again that night. But the next day, I knew what I had to do. So I went back to my house and up to my room. I quickly went into my closet, grabbed the clove of garlic with the staked nail, which was now black, and took it outside. My parents' house is made of stone, and I found the largest open space of wall with no windows and threw the clove against the stone. I swear the thing exploded against the wall like I had thrown a grenade. There was nothing left. I never found a piece of that clove or the nail. I threw all occult materials, objects, and books I had into the wood stove and burned them. I cleaned the sipples off the wall and furniture, and I never slept in that room again. Nothing like what I have told you ever happened to me again. I think whatever demonic inhuman it was had their one chance, but they failed. And they never bothered me again. So, do I now believe in God? Surprisingly, I'm still not sure that I do, but I do know that there are absolutely malicious entities in this world. And if you invite them into your life, they will gladly come in.
What is up, guys? It's Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you really enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a like, share, or possibly subscribe if you feel so inclined. For this episode, I would like to thank my special guest narrator, Viidith22. I will have a link to their channel in the description and in the video itself, so if you like his work, please go ahead and check him out. He's pretty good, and I think he really needs some more love here on YouTube. So if you like his work, go check him out. If you have any stories you'd like me to read, or any stories that you'd like to send in, whether they be personal scary stories, or stories that you've written as fiction, go ahead and send them to any of my social media links listed in the description below. That would be Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail. I'll take a look at them, and I'll try to include them in a video as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please feel free to include in the tagline what the name or theme of the story is, as well as how you would like to be credited if the story appears in a video. For those of you still waiting on the Q&A, I am doing the answers as we speak. The video is taking a little longer than expected because I got a few more questions than I actually expected, but expect that to be out soon. If you guys are curious about the music used in the video, that is always listed in the description below. It is always listed in the order it appears, and the names of the tracks are listed, as well as links to the artists. so if you're curious about the music, go ahead and check in the description. Last but not least, if you guys have any constructive criticism, please leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.